わさびアニメすごいですね。
Hello, hello, and welcome to another episode of Tabletop Otaku. I'm your illustrious host, B Zelda. My pronouns are they, them, and not only are we joined on Wasabi Anime, which is sponsored by Origins Game Fair, we are joined by one of my favorite human beings in the entire universe, Jammi. How's it
Hi,
going?
oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh gosh, I mean, I'm glad to have you here. Now, you and I, we've only honestly been talking about games and stuff for like 2 months now, so we might have a lot to really get out. Because I have known you as a game designer for quite some time. I have moderated shows that have been playing your games for like Roll20. I have like looked up to you from the stars, thinking like one day this is somebody that I will get to talk to and pick their brain and try to figure out how do they come up with so much amazing tabletop content. How do you do it?
Oh my gosh, I think the problem is I can't stop thinking about it, right? like, uh, yeah, it's definitely a thing where I can't help but like watch things or read things and feel like this would make a really fun game, right? So, which is most of my games, if not all of them.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, if I had to think of a game that, for folks who maybe don't know you by name, Belik Bayan, that was the first game that I personally encountered where I was like, oh my gosh, this game is really cool. The people that were playing it was really cool. It was hosted on Roll20 for a while with a comedy troupe.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
they did a fantastic job
They really
hosted
did.
by Masood, yeah, of Indoor Recess and Mythic Odysseys of Theros. I can't remember if that's the book or if that's their game. Doesn't matter. It was on the D&D channel and it was fabulous. And the way they played that game, it was excellent, but I had no idea about how do you even come up with something like that? Like what was your inspiration?
Yeah. So Bullet Brian was really my love letter to cyberpunk. I have very fond memories of Shadowrun, right? But but
Really? Okay.
but 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 but, but going back to actually play Shadowrun is very difficult, because I loved how it sold the idea of fantasy meets technology meets sci-fi meets cyberpunk, right? But in actuality, like you always just felt the differences and you always felt that and it wasn't like a fun, interesting tension for me.
Yeah.
And so Balik Bayan was my like was me trying to meld the two, right? And I think it came off really well because it really is the idea of magic and machine magic and the technology don't have to have these huge barriers in place. They could come from the same source, and that's really what like buy-in is. But yeah, and like the main inspirations for it are really because like a lot of people are like, oh, this is so different from like American cyberpunk, and I'm like, yeah, because
Incredibly
it's
so.
really yeah, because it's super inspired by anime, right? So it's really inspired by Ghost in the Shell and Akira,
Yes.
right? So especially like a lot of Akira is in it. Just maybe cranking up the hope a little more, a little less.
Significantly. It's gritty, but not that kind of gritty, you know?
Right. I don't want people to completely the things are dire in Balikbayan. You are on the run from the corp and you are playing elemental creatures of magic, right, who were enslaved by the corp, but you are trying to bring about a revolution, right? And you
Yes.
are trying to connect to the heart of city and bring about the rebirth of magic. So but yeah, that's definitely the main inspirations for Balikbayan.
Oh, I love that. Do you have any favorite playbooks? Like,
Ooh,
I don't know if that's a fair question to ask. That's like asking, like, what is your favorite child?
right. Well, okay, so there are two favorites. I think my favorite cyberpunky. Oh, this is hard now that I think
Yeah, I figured. I'm sorry.
about it. But well, I think I can clearly connect the dots, right? So, for example, I was like, I need a hacker because how can you have a cyberpunk game without a hacker. And I was like, but this is Balikbayan and this is the supernatural. So they hack memories instead, and they're
So
connected to the underworld instead, right? And they're connected to ghosts and their memories. And memories is like a consistent theme, especially in my earlier work. It's still present until now, but it was like a really huge thing. Partly because I have temporal lobe epilepsy, and so my relationship with memory is very unique.
okay.
But also, I was rewatching Magnetic Rose recently from the Memories film, and I was like, wow, I didn't realize how much of that just like infused in my consciousness. Because Satoshi Kon loves dealing with the themes of memory, right? And so it's
Yeah.
also present in a lot of my work. So the San Telmo hacking memories is very much in tune with that.
Oh my gosh. I love that. And I love the connections that you kind of made to really discover like this is why this is such an important touchstone for you. Like it's personal.
Right,
Oh my
right. Yeah,
goodness.
I put a lot of myself in all of my games, right? So, for example, a lot of my games will have you choosing what you look like to other people and what your true self looks like, and it really comes from me being a non-binary person, right? So,
Yes.
the idea of how other people see you versus how you really see yourself tends to come up a lot, right?
Oh, that's beautiful. All right. Well, tell me a little bit about your other games. Like, for example, Keeper of the Cards. Again, I've had, before I knew you, I had the privilege of moderating that game as well on Roll20 for Indie Showcase, where Jess, Go JG, got to play that. And did you play it with her? I believe you did.
Yeah. I did. That was
Yes.
super, super fun. That was
Oh my
really
gosh.
that. Yeah. That was
So
one of my incarnations of Takahiro Sato, so that was fun.
okay, because completely different vibe. Like this game was beautiful, but it just made you again. You this one deals with memories too, doesn't it? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, a little bit, a little bit. It still shows up, right? So Keepers of the Cards is a homage, is my love letter to card captor Sakura, right? So very clearly I didn't change too much, but
No, card captors of
uh
the cloud.
right. Exactly. I actually have a set of Clo cards that I use for oracle readings and stuff. They work
What?
really well. Yeah, I can give you a
What?
reading later if you
What?
like.
Yes, please. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So Keepers of the Cards is based on a tarot deck, so you can use either the cards that I designed for the game, or you can use normal any kind of basic tarot deck, right? And it really, so a lot of my games are very intense and
Oh
very
yeah.
up in your feelings and very high stakes. So Keeper of the Cards are one of my few like more cozier, sweeter games. Though there are parts where it can go like a little like
Heavy.
Cardcaptor Sakura, right? Like
Oh
it can
yeah.
go a little intense from time to time. So that's definitely a part of. But you basically play as magical children who have to recapture creatures of magic, and it's a really fun game because depending on the cards you draw and depending on who you're playing with, it can feel like different variations. Like I've played like a more Pokemon style
Yes.
Keepers of the Cards, and I've played one where it was like more like magical girl plus mecha anime, which is super
Whoa.
fun.
That's like
Yeah,
my
it was very
dream
cute.
right there.
Yeah, right,
Those are
right.
the two
The
things
best
I
of
love.
both worlds, right?
Yes.
Exactly. So
Oh my goodness. I love that. Well, all right. And I do want to keep talking about like Bayan a little bit, but like we'll round our way back to that a small amount. So, out of all the games that you've designed, do you have a favorite? Like, what do you find that you put the most of yourself into?
oh, the most of myself. I think it's in Balikbayan, but also in Apocalypse Keys, right? So Apocalypse Keys is like my biggest, my biggest chunkiest baby to date. So it's still well, all of my games are still in active development, which is the thrill of being a designer at Itch.io, right? You get to work on it with everybody else. But Apocalypse Keys is we released the playtest edition a few months ago, and it's in active development with Evil Hat Publishing, and it is a game of, it was mainly inspired by Hellboy, the comics and the films, especially the films. And
Okay.
you play as monsters who work for the Division. And actually, I feel like I should read out what the division stands for
Oh,
because
yes,
my
please.
partner worked really hard on it, and
Aw.
it's really amazing. Uh and it's very anime. So basically, you're an agent of the Department of Interdimensional Vigilance and International Security Interdisciplinary Operations Network, or the division,
Mm.
right? So, and you are there to solve mysteries, to hold back the apocalypse, to find out what the harbingers are up to. You are trying to, every time you solve a mystery, you have to find out what is the door they're after, what power are they trying to unlock, and you're trying to stop them before that happens, right? So each mystery is like a small apocalypse that becomes increasingly more difficult each time. So the stakes are really
Okay.
huge in Apocalypse Keys, and you are playing like really powerful monsters. So it's not about you growing in power, it's about you learning how to balance that power and learning how to control that power, mostly with your bonds and your connections to your fellow monsters and to other people. So it's very anime, right? So even though
Yeah.
Hellboy was the main inspiration, my intense love for anime, right? Your connections with others and trying to not go too far are definitely important aspects of Apocalypse Keys.
I mean, I could easily see that turning into starting off, very power of friendship, like you want to do what you want or what you can to support your friends, and then that potentially turning into something romantically involved. Like, I will never forget when you told me Apocalypse Keys had started off as one thing, and then it's really acquired this like polyamorous, polycule, like familial,
Yeah,
like really
yeah.
kind vibe with like all the support and love for each other.
Right, right. Actually, to be honest, I only I only like with recent months realized I was poly, but then Apocalypse Keys is staring at me the whole time going, "You've been poly all along." And I just You're
Isn't that
right.
the way though? You know?
Right, right. The game is jokingly called Apocalypse Kisses by a lot of people I've play
Yes.
tested it with, because there's a lot of like intense feelings, and when you create a character, you actually have to choose what the darkness demands of you, and
Ooh.
so it's what the darkness within you wants to push you towards. So, for example, the Summon playbook, you can choose from things like to push away those I need most, to yearn for a love that can never be mine, to despair as an immortal, to fall in love with the harbinger of the apocalypse, to embrace and strengthen my prophecy. So it's very very like intense
Wow.
stuff. Yeah, and then this is the one
Yes.
of the screen is for the surge. So to be the downfall of those I care for, to destroy everything around me for the slightest trespass. This feels very accurate, right? Like this section. Um,
Yeah. Oh my god, I
right?
love it though. It's
But yeah,
very
like
go big or go home.
yeah, and I think that is the thing that I really have to like. I'm working on the current edition, right, for as we hit towards fully publishing it, and I feel like I have to get across the idea of you really have to go big with this game. Like you have to go all out with this game because I made a lot of the moves incredibly powerful,
Okay.
right? And it's not because the monsters and the players will be able to handle all the challenges easily. It's just that things get really big on a really big scale. Like one of the mysteries that come with the book is really inspired by Pacific Rim and Evangelion, right?
Really?
Yeah,
Oh.
so you get to like go against like kaiju like creatures, which I call Halima, which is
Oh,
connected to
yes.
my Filipino nest, right? And they're all psychic monsters that are connected to these teenagers. Like it's very right, right. And like because the first mystery is like there's a murder that's going on in these apartments. You have to help the monsters, the one and then go figure out what's going on. And then a few mysteries later, it's like we are on island zero and there's rifts opening and monsters will come through. Can these teens handle what's going on? One of them and their entire Halima has gone missing. What happened, right? So yeah, Apocalypse Keys is can tell like big emotional stories, but also like big stake stories, right? About the end of the world happening over and over again, and you have to keep
Mm-hmm.
pushing back against it. So
Oh,
um
I love that.
but but one of the core elements of Apocalypse Keys is it's also a constant danger that you yourself will become a harbinger, right? So
I
you have
wondered if that was a factor too.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And like so I was rewatching Jin-Roh recently, And it's a really, I really don't want to spoil the movie because it's really good, and if you
I
haven't
was
watched
actually
it,
going to ask
please.
you, can you tell me a little bit? Because I've never, when you mentioned it the first time we were chatting, I'm like, okay, I'll look at it. I'm like, all right, it's not really my vibe, but like, I do want to know what it's about. If I, I probably won't ever watch it. Could you?
Oh, but it's so worth watching it though. I really, okay. It is intense. It is intense, and it is very sad, but like, so what I love about Jin-Roh and what really stayed with me over the years is that it's entirely framed around, it uses the Red Riding Hood story, right,
Yeah.
as a structure that the movie, and more importantly, the connections, right, the relationships that are present. And what I really like about Jin-Roh is that it's takes place in an alternative version of 1950s Japan when the protests were going on. And so it's an incredibly political film, but it's always connected to the characters.
Okay.
And I'm really gonna geek out about Jin-Roh because when I rewatched it
I
recently, I was
need
like,
you
gosh, this
to.
is so much better than I remember, and I
I
remembered
want
it
you to
being
hype
good.
this up for me too, because I need to be
Yeah,
motivated to watch it. Because I'd really looked at it and I
so
watched the
good.
trailer and I'm like, okay, this is interesting, but I need to know, why is it so important to you? Why does it make you feel like such passion towards it? Like,
Yeah.
how has it impacted you?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So like the thing, and I'm really trying to avoid spoilers, right? Because there's so many
I
interesting
won't.
twists and
I have
turns.
Swiss cheese brain. I won't remember what you say. It's fine in comparison to the movie.
Right. Right. Okay. So basically the thing with Jinro is that you have this wolf brigade. So they are, well, I'm sorry, no, you have the main like special unit, right? So because Japan was on the verge of falling apart politically, because so they needed like a really strong military unit that could keep in control. But now it's at a time when the government is like, we don't need you so much anymore, and so we have to figure out a way to dismantle your power. But there is this significant rebellion going on, right? And so the thing is, they use these young women, right? They call them uh, riding hoods, right? Who they transport weapons and they transport bombs because everyone is just going to like gloss over and not really think too hard about a girl moving around in this like in this situation. And so you have two characters, one who is part of that system, who is one of these wolves, right, who is monstrous. And that really inspired a lot of Apocalypse Keys, right? Because it was something that I saw early on. He looks human,
Yeah.
right? But there's something in him, but he also struggles because it starts with him being unable to shoot one of those girls, right? He's in the sewers, she's in the middle of running away, she has a bomb with her. She's willing to like she's basically going to turn into a suicide bomber in the moment, but he can't bring himself to actually shoot her when he should in the moment. And so it's this really like interesting conversation about trauma and what it means to be a monster and what it means to be human. And what's really interesting about Jin-Roh is that originally Mamoru Oshii of Ghost in the Shell was supposed to direct the film, and he wrote the screenplay for this film.
Oh my
But
God.
it feels, but instead he got like one of a younger person. I'm so sorry, the name is like escaping me at the moment. Akira, like, because I remember it's kind of similar, but yeah. So instead he took over, and because of that, it feels like such a different. The characterization is so good, and I feel like it's so good in a way that Mamoru Oshii is not capable of doing. Because like I watched Ghost in the Shell right after, and I was like,
yeah. Do you want to tell me about how that rewatch was?
yeah, because like Jin-Roh was so good at bringing the political into the personal, right? Because attaching the political to the actual characters and having them really like connect to each other and really like it made it so much more easier to relate to versus in Ghost in the Shell, the politics are just like kind of always there, but I never really feel like the characters are really connected to it. And there's a way that it's still present in the movie more so the TV show, but in general, the Major and the rest of Section 9 are not really as critical of the system as they can be, considering how much they're used as a tool and how much they are subservient. Yeah. And so there's a lack of, and people arguably have said that that's what makes Ghost in the Shell not quite as thematically cyberpunk as it could be, because there's no sense of rebellion within Ghost
Yeah.
of the Shell, right? There's no sense of like wanting to change
Fighting
the
back.
system.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in Jin-Roh, there's a really strong sense of like, are you going to fight the system? Are you going to change the system? Are you going to uphold the system? And so Jin-Roh, I felt held up better because the characters are really front and center, right? And the I was watching Ghost of the Shell and I was like, I think Mamoru Oshii like thinks this is a movie about what it means to be human, but I don't think it really is.
Yeah.
And that ending I felt was
Oh,
such a
God.
betrayal of the major and who she is, that she
Trying to
just
remember,
really
it's been
wanted
a
to
long
have
time.
AI babies.
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was it was basically the puppet master being all like, I want you to merge with me, right? And
Okay, yeah.
she was like emotional and like, yes. And I'm like, no, this is no, this is I
completely
don't
forgotten
like
about
this.
that.
My
Oh
gosh, it like
goodness.
undermines the entire movie, that ending.
And like the major is a character as well. Like that's not the same character that
Yeah.
we've spent all of this
Yeah,
time with to grow and fall in love
exactly.
with for to make that decision, to make like that
Yeah,
choice. It didn't feel
yeah.
natural.
Exactly. And there's this weird way, I mean, if we get into like feminism and anime, it's gonna like go forever, but basically, because I
Gotta
was
come up at
watching
least
it.
once. Mhm.
Yeah, true, but I was watching and I was going, look at the major, like non-binary icon, right? Like I really loved her the entire
As a kid, I
film.
looked up to her. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then suddenly in that last moment it was like, it felt like she was faltering into, it's kind of like, it's
The
kind of like
boxes.
Black Widow with Marvel, right? Like all of a sudden, like falling prey to her feminine instincts, like as if it's a problem, as if it's
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm like, and I didn't feel that way in Jinro at all, right? Like I felt, um, even though it's so hard to describe, even though it looks like a relationship between a man and a woman, it felt very queer to me in
Yeah.
some
Okay.
aspects, like the relationship. It's because what is queerness if not trying to understand yourself and your identity, right? So
That right there, 100%.
yeah. So I really, so even though Jinro is such a quiet film and such a subtle film in comparison, I felt like it goes way deeper into its themes of what it
Okay.
means to be human, what it means to be in charge of your own destiny. uh yeah, it's really, and I was like sobbing through like some parts of Jinra. I was like
What? Oh
ugly
my
crying,
goodness.
and at the end I was just like, okay, what goes to the show next? The preparation for the street. And like from that emotional intense high, and I was like watching Ghost in the Shell. This is a very pretty film, but
Yeah,
I feel
visually
like, yeah,
beautiful.
it's
The combat
gorgeous,
wonderful. The
gorgeous,
animation is fantastic. And
100%.
that's what I have in my memory, you know?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
I don't
mm-hmm.
have a lot of the interpersonal relationships. I don't remember the characters. They weren't really memorable.
Yeah, except for my revolver boyfriend, Togusa.
See? No.
Yeah,
I'm
but
so sorry.
he's like the mostly human character. Actually, I was watching it. I was like telling my partner, I love him so much. And then Matthew was like, no, you talk about him all the time. It's like, but he's like this detective out of water in the cyberpunk world. That I just really, the human element, and
Yeah.
stretching it from Mamoru Oshii, but it's the most human element. Uh, which coming back to games like Butterfly, and like that's always an important part of my design, is like the human element, right? Like
That's what
who you
grounds
connect
people.
to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like my games are very emotional games, and they ask you to engage with your emotions and explore them. And yeah, it's definitely like that bit of that jammy sparkle, I think, with my
I really like
games.
that. Why do you think that you lean towards the emotional? Like, do you feel like that you balance that, I guess, as equitably as necessary with the mechanics? Or do you
Yeah,
feel like the
actually,
mechanics feeds into the emotion of it?
exactly. So as a designer, I really enjoy trying to decipher and figure out how can I create mechanics that support the kind of play that I want, right? So
Okay.
if I want emotions to be front and center without having to depend on the GM and the players bringing it in, how can I support that mechanically, right? So for example, in Apocalypse Keys, your bonds with each other are mechanically significant because it's powered by the Apocalypse game, but you don't want to roll too high in Apocalypse Keys. You're trying to hit the sweet spot of like
What's the sweet spot?
eight to 10, right? So
Interesting.
yeah, and each time, so speaking of the emotional aspect a little bit, you gain darkness tokens whenever you work towards the emotional themes of your playbook. So for example,
Yeah,
with the
how does that
summoned,
happen?
yeah, so with the summoned, they can gain darkness tokens whenever they feel unloved or abandoned, whenever they
Oh,
overreact for violence, whenever they ask someone to love me and only ever me. That was one of
oh my
the
goodness.
things of the summoned. And for example, let's say the found, who is a more psychic character, the way they can gain darkness tokens is to feel frustrated or scared, react with uncertainty or cowardice, ask someone else to listen to my wisdom, ask someone to open their emotions to me. So depending on how much you engage with these things, that's how you gain tokens, and that's what you add to the roll. So there are no stats in Apocalypse Keys. It's based on
I
how much
love
you
that.
play into the themes and the emotions that are built into each playbook. For example, one of my, it's so hard to pick a favorite, right? But like recently, some people have been talking about The Last, which is basically, what if Martian Manhunter or Superman were in a Hellboy comic? That's what that playbook is. So
Sure.
so it's an entire playbook about dealing with grief because you've lost your people. You were the last of your kind,
Ah, there it
right?
is. Okay.
Yeah. So with the last, they gain darkness tokens every time they feel lonely or rejected, or ask someone to tell them of their past, or ask someone to doubt their future. And
Oh,
so yeah, it's very emotional stuff, right? Like a lot of the last playbook moves are about dealing with that grief, right? And dealing with that tragedy and wanting it to not happen to anyone else, right? That is what drives you as a character, as a playbook. And so the more you play into that, so but then there's also that problem of going back to the mechanical, going too far. If you roll an
mm-hmm.
11 plus, it's usually a version of the move where you go too far. There's like recently, like J Dragon of Possum Creek Games has called it a disastrous success, and I think that's a really good way of putting it, right?
Oh,
Like
that's beautiful.
you get what you want, but something like, because you really go too far with your power, right? So you're trying to hit that sweet spot of 8 to 10. And so there's always a question. You decide before each roll, how many darkness tokens are you going to invest,
I
right?
wondered if you could do that as well. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, right. So you can roll like 0 tokens, like meaning none, or all
Mm-hmm.
the way up to 3. And so it's a question of like, do you really want to make sure that you have the best chance possible? But then what if you go too far? And so then you roll, and then if you have bonds with other characters, if you go too far, or if you don't go far enough, you can add those bonds as a bonus,
Oh,
right?
beautiful. Okay.
Yeah. So I've had like some really great anime moments where it's like, I rolled too low. I'm at like, I'm here at a 4. Like I rolled a 4 in total. This sucks. But I'm gonna use all my bonds with my friends, with my fellow agents. I'm gonna build it all the way up to a 10, and then like, because
Mm-hmm.
you can add as many bonds as you
See,
want
that's
to.
really cool too. That sounds like a unique mechanic that you don't get in a lot of games.
Yeah, and plus it's a rule in Apocalypse Keys that when you use the bond, you have to describe how that connection is helping you,
Good,
either
because I
in the
love
moment or as a
that.
flashback. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
but you can also have a bond with what the darkness demands of you, so that darker
I'm
aspect of
sorry,
yourself.
what? Oh
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. Exactly. And so uh it can be like, there's an example in the playtest edition where it's like, I remember that time, like I screwed up in a mission, but my friends, they taught me how to play cards that day, and but they still wanted to burn one of the bonds of what the darkness demands of you.
Okay.
And so that translated to, I know that when I have to destroy the world and all of humanity, I'll make sure the two of you survive no matter what. Right? Like it's very, which
Oh
has
my
actually happened in a
gosh.
game. I took that from an actual game that happened during a playtest. The rest of us were
Oh,
like, oh my gosh, that's both beautiful and terrifying.
right. It's somehow so romantic, but also
Right?
it gives me chills. Like, I don't, no, thank you. I would like to survive.
Right.
Oh my
Exactly.
goodness.
But yeah. So Apocalypse Keys is like so inspired by this. It's very go big or go home, but at the heart of it is even though Jin-Roh is a completely different anime in tone and feel, it has that emotional core. that I really, really enjoy.
Oh my word, that's beautiful. So I do really want to touch quickly on some folks in chat. So brought up some things about Apocalypse Keys.
Ooh.
However, before we do that, I just need to let everybody know that Tabletop Otaku is powered by Origins Game Fair, and I'm going to be at the con this year. So come and join me and thousands of amazing gamers at Origins Game Fair September 30th to October 3rd in Columbus, Ohio, online and around the world. Event submissions are open right now. Share your love of gaming by signing up to run an event. You could probably run Apocalypse Cubes.
Oh my gosh, I could.
We need game masters and volunteers. Y'all can get some awesome perks, including free badges and event hotel stays. Find out more information at originsgamefair.com. So, Jammi, who is Alice?
Ooh,
At
Alice.
Sueri_witch in chat was asking about that. They need to bring, you need to bring Alice back. Was that a character that you
Oh,
played in a game?
yeah,
How
yeah,
did
yeah,
it
yeah.
go?
So in one of the so I was really lucky enough that someone was running a game and I got to play the Shade
Ooh,
playbook, which is
okay.
like a playbook that's based on the fact that you didn't die properly, right? So you have this connection to death,
I love that.
and Alice was they were so it was part of like a period drama kind of version of Apocalypse Keys, which is really, really fun. And so Alice is, because I always like to play really creepy and intense characters.
You? What?
Yeah, who knew?
Never. You've
Yeah,
got two types: creepy and
yeah,
intense, himbo.
yeah. It's true. It's true. It's a wide. Actually, there's like a few cases. There's like a couple of times where the same character had both qualities, and
Oh
people
my
were like,
gosh.
it's a golden retriever of sadness. Like who is this character?
Oh,
So, but
that's
Alice is
beautiful.
definitely more in the creepy and a lot of yearning. I like to play yearning characters. So, Alice was a lot of fun, and it was really fun playing the Shade because the Shade is a more intellectual character. So it's a combination of death and the fact that they can figure out what's going on. Like on an intellectual level.
Okay. I really like that. Have you had the opportunity to be a player for Apocalypse Keys a whole lot, or have you mostly been running it to try and get a vibe for like how players will interact with the game?
Yeah, I've mostly been a player, right? And so, which is why like there's this newer game that I'm in the middle of developing, a Forge in the Dark social intrigue game.
Oh.
And I have had the rare opportunity to be more of a player than a GM in that game that I'm working on.
What?
Thanks to shout out to Leandra Pondock for running that game. Thank you so much. And so I was like, wow, this is because it's kind of hard to be a player in your own game, like just to set it up because uh when I design a game, the last thing I design are the GM tools, right? Because I'm still figuring out what
Really?
the game is. Yeah, and
Oh,
it shows how I don't prep as a GM. I'm one of those poker faced,
me.
you know, like I'm one of those I'm one of those GMs where if someone says something, was it blah 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 all along, then I'm thinking, I have no idea what's going on. I only know the next four words I'm going to say for sure. And then I hope when I get to the end of the four words, the rest of the sentence will catch up, which it does, as long as
Yep.
you
Yep.
know. But what I'll say in the moment is, that is correct.
Yes.
You have got it. And then they have this face of like, oh, I figured it out. I'm like, yes, you
They're so
did. Even
proud.
though, even though it's like, thank you for that idea. That was better than the little idea I had in my mind. So I'm just gonna go with what the player said. Uh
Those
so
are GMing tips 101, y'all.
yeah, just have a poker face, right? Very, very essential. But yeah, and so Apocalypse Keys is very much that. It's a game that thrives in you not preparing too much because it's a mystery game, but the keeper slash GM doesn't know the solution to the mystery. It doesn't really know what's going on either. It's dependent on a role and it's dependent on a certain set of moves from the players. So it's up to the players to interpret what's going on and then they roll to see if the theory was right or not, right? So
I love that. It's very
yeah,
reactionary, which is how I play my
yeah,
games, you know?
right, and it's fun for the keeper too because I've played other mystery RPGs where the GM knows what's going on and I don't have as much of a fun time because it can feel frustrating if the players are not thinking right
in
along
the
the
right
lines of how the
direction that you need. You're giving them all the clues.
exactly
They're not picking up any of the pieces. They're picking up like
yeah
the cheese that you left on the ground over there. And it's like, that has nothing to do with the story. I'm sorry I included that detail. And now I have to find a way to route that back to the main storyline. Yeah.
exactly
Been
and a
there.
lot of the time a lot of the times what happens is the players come up with something better than what the written
Usually.
mystery was, right? So I had that problem a lot when I was running Tales from the Loop, where I was like, what the players are coming up with is better than what the. So then I would on the fly try to shift it towards what the players were
Yeah.
thinking, because if not, it would just feel really weird. So there's none of that in Apocalypse Keys, right?
Oh,
Where you're
good.
just sort of. So you are. I was talking to Sean Nittner recently of Evil Hat, and the way he put it is that the keeper is not a step ahead or several steps ahead of the players. The keeper is like in sync with the players the whole time, and
Huh.
you're playing alongside them the whole time. And I was like, and that's my GMing style in general,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, my GMing style in general is like, I love to be in sync with what the players bring to the table, right? Right. Rather than me having like a plan, it's better to, and being able to like weave those in. I'm gonna admit, like a lot of the time I'll run a game and people will be like, "Do you have like a board where you connect all of our PCs and NPCs together? Because
Like
did you
string
plan all of this?"
yarn.
Yeah. Like they're convinced that's what I'm doing. I'm like, oh no. I just look at this list of NPCs. This person hasn't come in the while. I'm gonna make, I'll just have them suddenly show up and like, why are they here? How are they involved? What's going on? Right. So
Oh, I love that. I've discovered the hard way that my weakness is running campaigns, because you have to take, all of that really pertinent information from your first session and somehow weave that back towards like the ending. I've only run like 2 to 3 campaigns in my entire gaming history, because that's a skill. It is a very, very strong skill that you need to
right.
have to be able to do
Right.
that. But
Yeah.
some games, like it sounds like Apocalypse Keys, really facilitate the fact that I don't have that, and I could just pull whatever information the players are coming with, and if they come up with it, they are more likely to remember it versus
Yeah.
me regurgitating information at them. So
Yeah.
I'm in love with that idea.
Yeah, because like when you create a character in Apocalypse Keys, you choose their origin and you choose what the darkness demands of them, and that's a lot for the keepers to draw upon and bring into the story, right? I will also say, like, I used to be in a similar situation, so my earlier games were all one shots or short games,
Yeah.
right? And then later when I joined the Gauntlet community and I started getting into, so the Gauntlet community is an online gaming group, and for the most part you can jump into like a monthly. So like it's a series that only lasts for like 4 sessions, right?
Okay.
I say that, but there are a lot of us GMs who run like 8, 12, 16
Yeah.
sessions, right? But for the most part, it's easy to jump into like a game that only lasts a month. But then as a GM, when I started to run those kind of games, it took real skill, because the first session it's mostly character generation.
Yep.
Second session, you're getting into it. Third session, you have to start ramping up towards the climax. And then fourth session has to be like a climax plus like some epilogue, right?
And you
And
gotta wrap
so
everything in a nice bow.
yeah. And so when I had to do that over and over and over again, like it really developed that skill in me as a GM. And so a lot of that is also Apocalypse Keys, I feel runs best for longer series, for longer campaigns.
Okay.
But actually, like even with Black Buy, when I first made it, I thought, well, this is like a 2 to 4 session game. In actuality, in actual
Campaign.
playing, I know someone who started playing Black Buy when I first released it, and they're still playing that same series until now. Yeah, they meet every 2 weeks, and they're still going. And they just I share them my playtest material, so they've been like playtesting.
That is fantastic. So their characters are changing as like the playbooks are changing, or some of the rule sets are being slowly modified.
Right. Exactly. Because like I've been tweaking the playbook, shifting them towards more personable and more. But yeah, definitely. Like a significant change in Black Vine is. That hasn't come back yet on itch.io, but it will soon. I'm gonna update that soon. Is that the city becomes more important?
Oh, good.
Yeah, and like and then you can discover aspects of the city. So like what's showing up on the screen right now is the heart of the city, the forest, Sula, the spirit realm. You can discover these more magical aspects of the city, but before you can even get there, you have to interact more with your more traditional cyberpunk places in a city. So the market, the sensorium, the lab, and then once you discover and interact with the people there and with the places there, then you can discover more of the magical aspects of the city. And so these are like new things that I've been tweaking with, because I feel like in a lot of these cyberpunk anime, the city, especially like let's say Akira, right?
Yeah, the
Uh,
city is so important.
right, it's its own character basically,
Yeah.
like in a really, because like a lot of people keep talking about the city in Akira, like they keep talking about what's going on, how they can protect the city, and
Mm-hmm.
you see all these different factions on all these different people who live there, and so the city is really an important part of the cyberpunk genre, and I felt like I really had to reflect that in Balikbayan.
Oh, I love that. That's something I've never really spent enough time thinking about. But like, yeah, the city is incredibly crucial in a cyberpunk city because, or in a cyberpunk setting, because that is what makes the whole city feel like it is
Mhm,
cyberpunk. Like, of course, it's, you know, how people are treated and, you know,
mhm,
any cybernetics you might have, but it's the setting that establishes what kind of cyberpunk world this is. Also,
mhm.
really quick question: what is a sensatorium?
Oh, a sensorium, right,
That,
right,
that,
right.
that
So
one.
yeah, yeah, no worries, no worries. It's just basically the idea of like you can find anything and everything to bury the senses and numb the pain. Hollow dreams, lovers for hire, and any number of tools of distraction and pleasure. But power hides here, waiting for us to find it and feed it. So basically, it's like all these different cyberpunk places that are connected to pleasure, you know, and
Appropriately
yeah,
cyberpunk. How do we
yeah, yeah.
disconnect? Well, here you go.
Right, right. And so so you can, as you interact with this part of the city, you unlock more moves. So this is based on the belonging outside belonging system. And so it depends on like what you choose, what will your sensorium look like and how your group is going to interpret it. So once again, this is very dependent on I want the players to come in and tell me what the world is like, right? There are options for them to choose from, but how
Love
they
that.
interpret it is completely different. So in I got to run this in Asians represent. And so for example, for the sensorium aesthetics, they chose faces and bodies that respond to your hidden desires, performance and shows that are as dangerous as they are mesmerizing, and private rooms and intimate alcoves surrounding an arena stage. So it became more like gladiator fight focus,
Yeah.
right? But
Okay.
if they had chosen other things like exquisite food and drink, or a curated collection of illegal pleasures, or android animals that are more real than what they mimic, then it would have changed the feeling of their sensorium completely, right? So
Oh my goodness.
yeah, yeah.
I'm a
So
sucker
so
for choice
right.
too.
I
You
love
know?
doing that though, because it makes the game feel really different per group, right? Because it
Yeah.
depends on the choices they make and how they interpret those choices.
Well, and
So
world building is so important when you're a player too, because those
right.
that's your buy-in
Yeah,
right there.
100%,
That
100%.
makes you connected to some of the choices that you've made. I got to play in a cyberpunk game. It was
Mm.
based on a TV show that was based on a book that is
Oh, Altered Carbon, is that one?
that's the one.
Yeah, yeah.
I
I
was
see what
the
this means. Yeah.
only play yeah.
I understand.
So I was the only player who had not consumed any of the media. So I tried to
Mm,
go into the game with my very default Western expectation of
mm,
cyberpunk. And a lot of that was pretty easy to slip into, and a lot of it was
right.
just completely over my head. There was no
Mm-hmm,
buy in for
mm-hmm,
me. I didn't know what I was
mm-hmm,
getting into. And that was
mm-hmm.
also my fault for not watching the media. But
Yeah, but I also feel like if you need to do homework
oh,
before, like if you want to watch things and enjoy things before getting
yeah.
into a game, that's totally fine. But I feel like for me anyway, right? Because so much of my games depend not depend, but so many of my games are inspired by what I watch or what I read, what I enjoy. But I don't want the players or the keeper to ever feel like they're lost,
Yeah.
right? Like for example, I love Brindlewood Bay, but I had to watch a lot of Murder She Wrote before running the game
Really?
because it's such a integral American
Theme.
comfort like
Yeah.
mystery kind of thing, and there was a lot I was not getting as a Filipino in the Philippines, right? Like it's I was like, what is the context? I had to become Jessica Fletcher. I had to
Yeah.
watch 20 episodes
Oh, my
to
word
run the game
though.
with confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I do tend to go a little overboard. But so instead I try to build all of these like choices and these mechanical things where so I think a really good example of this, which is very anime, is Girl by Moonlight, which is game and development.
Yeah,
Also with
by
Evil Hat.
Andrew
Yeah, by Andrew
something rather.
Gillis, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and it's so good because someone picked the time traveler playbook, and when she played it, it was so Magica Magica. I can't say anymore without spoiling it, but it was so Magica Magica.
But I love
I
that.
was Yeah, and like she was literally saying stuff that was in the anime,
Oh my
right? That the
gosh.
character would say. And I was like, have
Mm-hmm.
you watched Madoka Magica? She was like, no, should I? Go, okay, I'm not gonna say anymore because then I'm gonna spoil
Ah!
like Madoka Magica for you.
Oh, I mean, I've seen Madoka Magica, so like I'm fine
yeah,
there. I love it.
yeah.
For our
But I,
viewers, I'm so sorry. You should
yeah,
see it.
you really should see it. But I thought, wow, this is really good design that the person has not watched that anime,
That is
but they are
impressive.
really embodying. Yeah, I was really like, and so that's something that I really want to bring into my own games where like you don't have to watch or consume the thing, but and you really make it your own at the same time, but you draw upon it. So Apocalypse Keys is very much that, except cranked to like not even 11, like 20. Hellboy, but to 20 with a lot of anime in it. So but you know, because the game is crafted in a certain way, that means that it's not like a D&D game where, because it's so structurally different, right? That a D&D, you don't know what kind of game you're getting into if you're getting into a D&D game. It's very dependent on the players, the GM, what they're going to pick up, what supplement or module they're going to run, if that's the case, if it's going to be homebrew, and it's so different versus let's say a game of Apocalypse Keys. It can be very different from one person to another, but the general vibe is the same, right?
I love
It's
that.
about, right, it's about friendships, it's about mystery and horror, it's about if you're going to become a harbinger or not. So but how you interpret those things, completely up to you. So it's still, I have not seen, the Summoned is one of the most popular playbooks. I have not seen any summon that's similar to each other. Like I have people ask, like, so
Really?
what is the summon like? I go, oh my gosh, it depends. Like I have seen, it was based on Hellboy. I have not seen anyone play a Hellboy yet.
That's
Right?
impressive.
Yeah, so far I've seen like an android from a dimension of hell, a
Ooh.
crocodile alien that wants to eventually eat the planet, like
Sure.
very different versions of the summon. I've seen like a fire, Sean's character is this like fiery character from this other dimension of warriors. Very different stuff, right? Even if it's
Love
the
that.
same themes, the same ideas, the same playbook, completely different interpretation. Yeah, so it's really, really interesting.
That's wonderful. I mean, that's just like somebody can look at the playbook. And again, for like those who are unfamiliar, a playbook is really just all of your information you're going to go through and circle. You
Mhm,
know, you're going to
mhm.
select the feelings, the tropes that will help you build that character within the framework of their subject. So the summoned. Can you like maybe tell me just a little bit about like the summoned playbook? Because I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
sure.
very curious.
Yeah, so the summit is basically like the most. I'll read the description. I wear the crown of prophecy. I embody the promise and inevitability of the apocalypse. My power is blunt, aggressive, and demanding. My heart yearns to love and be loved. And so basically, there's a prophecy that haunts you, very Hellboy,
It's
right?
so
And so,
Hellboy, you know?
yeah. And so
Blunt,
it's
they want to be loved. Like,
right. And it's a question of like, how are you going to resist this prophecy? Like, how are you going to push back against it? And so, for example, you can choose your powers of darkness, which really flavor how you interact with your moves and your basic moves, very masks like, right? So you can, for the summon playbook, you choose from colossal strength, emotion amplification, shadow control,
oh my
elemental
goodness.
resistance, weapons from elsewhere. So it's very
What?
like, yeah,
Weapons
so
from
depending,
elsewhere?
yeah, the weapons from
Oh,
elsewhere has been really interesting. Some people were like, my body is the weapon. The android said that, right? So like I am not in control of my body all the time. And you know,
yes.
and other people are like, I can just summon like literal
That's
weapons
what I would do.
from the throne room.
Portals
Yeah.
open up and
Yeah.
swords come flying out.
Exactly.
I need that. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So it's completely up to you how you want to interpret that, right? And then depending on how what moves you choose, you can also be a summoner yourself, or you can be, so that one's like borrow power, like you summon a creature from another world to help you. Or you can
Okay.
choose a move called Come On Tough Guy when you go up against an opponent that is colossal and otherworldly, right? And yeah, there are names of the playbook moves like we're family now, everything for you, my love, together we are destiny. It is very much
Classics.
the shonen hero, but tragic hero
Mm-hmm.
of the playbooks. And yeah. So those are the main things though. Of course, each playbook comes with ruin moves, which is like the moves where you don't even have to roll and you can draw upon your harbinger power, but you have to mark like a
Darkness.
yeah, you have to mark ruin, and
Okay.
when you level up ruin enough times, you become a harbinger. That's it, right?
Aw.
Yeah. So it's up to you how often you lean into being a harbinger, but there's a lot of power in being one, right? So for the summoned, one of the abilities you have that you can choose is called Heavy as the Crown. And so you may always declare a harbinger knows you and the terrible prophecy that awaits you. Describe what part they will play in your prophecy. So when you declare this, choose one. So you have choices and how this plays out, what your connection and relationship is with that harbinger. So as you can see, I like to build moves where the players can go, no, I know that NPC, right?
Yeah.
Or no, they're connected to my past, right? Or they're connected to what? Because I love a lot of PPTA games, but I don't love when the triggers are so specific that you can't easily bring them into the game,
Not a lot of
right?
room for interpretation.
Yeah, yeah. And so like I love playbooks and mechanics where the players are empowered to do what they like and
Mhm.
to use the powers anytime that they want. I like being surprised as a keeper and a GM where I go like, what do you do? And then the players are like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to draw upon the sleeping god that's within me and bring about the nightmares and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yes, let's do it.
Because
Right?
you didn't even consider that, you know?
Yeah, let's just go for it. Right.
Oh,
So,
I think that's fabulous.
yeah,
I've been a PBTA fanboy for a very, very long time, but I get dunked on a lot because PBTA can be a little stiff.
right,
But
right.
you have taken it and turned it into something more flexible where it allows players their own personal interpretation, but not so much that it kind of goes wild. Because again, you still really create these, I don't want to use the word narrow, but these confined spaces where they can go
Right,
wild in.
right.
And I
Like these
love that.
creative spaces, right? Where I go,
Yeah.
this is a structure and it's completely up to you how you want to interpret it. But there you go. Like I'm giving you this playground to play in, right? So
Oh, that's so fantastic. Well, is there anything else you'd like to plug? Anything else you want to talk about? What other works are you doing before we start to
Ooh,
wrap up?
yeah. So Blake Brian and Apocalypse Keys are my biggest projects. Well, okay, actually, when I really think about it, they're like 10 going on right now.
I believe
But those
that.
are but those are the biggest ones. And if you want to keep up with them, you can follow me on Twitter at Temporal Hiccup. And you can follow me at itch.io, temporalhiccup.itch.io if you want to see what's coming in and what I'm working on. But uh I currently have like about like 40 plus games on itch.io. So
Genuinely?
yeah. I've slowed down. I used
Wow.
to come up with like 1 to 2 games a month, you know, like smaller games, but now I'm really working on bigger ones.
That
uh
is fantastic though. Holy heck.
yeah. No, I really have a problem because after I finished the first draft of Apocalypse Keys earlier this year towards a playtest edition, uh to relax, I spent 2 weeks working on the Forge of the Dark political social intrigue game. So and
To
I re-
relax. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I'm closer to around 50 games. I just haven't officially released the other 10.
So where can people support you then? Because like
Oh
how do
yeah.
you survive? I assume you just never sleep, you know, you occasionally
Sleep is an
hibernate.
interesting concept. Yes, yes. No, sometimes
One
I
month
go
a
to
year, you're
sleep
yeah.
and I wake up and I realize I was designing in my sleep because I
Yes.
wake up in mid thought, right? I go like I'm gonna do this with the mechanic. But yeah, if you'd like to support me, I would appreciate it. I have a Patreon, patreon.com/Sowrd Queen Games, because game design is my full-time job.
Nice.
I'm disabled, and so in different ways, and so game design is what I love and what is easy for me to work with my disabilities. And so if you could support me through there, and that's my patrons have access to all the games I'm working on, which
Ooh.
is, you know, quite a few, including that political social intrigue game, and which is very magical, very big. And yeah, so that's the best way to support me and also have a sneak peek. I'm working right now on a on a game that's inspired by Fleetwood Mac and David Bowie and
What?
like musicians. Yeah, where you are also
Really?
gods that are trying not to die while seeking fame. that's what I started working on a few weeks ago to also relax from.
To relax again. I
Yeah.
don't think you're using that word properly.
Okay. But I'm gonna be releasing that to my Patreon soon if you want to take a look at that one.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm gonna have to join your Patreon. My girlfriend would be really into that. She loves music, so like
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've been listening
based.
to Fleetwood Mac on repeat too while I write the game. So and one of the playbooks is exactly David Bowie.
Oh my
Like
word.
they're called the Mask and they go through different personas like David Bowie
Mhm.
did. So anyway,
Mhm.
yeah, that's my relaxing project right now.
Oh, relaxing. I think that's so marvelous though. Do you ever see yourself launching a Kickstarter for any of your works?
Oh, so I was lucky enough to work. So I'm from the Philippines, so that means we don't have access to Kickstarter, right?
Right.
Yeah, but I got to work with Jason Petre of Genesis of Legend Publishing, and we
Yeah.
recently had a successful Kickstarter for Once More Into the Void, which is a Firebrands framework game that's based on Mass Effect 2 and Star
What?
Trek Picard. Yeah, and it's
All
so
of my nerdy
emotional.
friends would be so into that.
Yeah,
I
it
say
is
this
such an
like I'm not
emotional
into
game.
it, but like
Yeah. Because
oh
the
my
premise of the
gosh.
game is that you were once a crew and you were once a team, but the captain like betrayed everyone, right? And you fell apart, but the threat is coming back for the galaxy and you have
Is
to
this
bring
still
the crew
available?
together. So
Can I
you can
Yeah.
pre-order it, right?
Okay.
Through BackerKit, and you will have access to the because I released the game fully on itch.io. I'm just working on the final version, which is I'm gonna be honest, makes because the art is incredible and done by amazing artists. I got to work with artists from the Philippines for it, so it's really really great.
Yeah.
And I'm adding things to the game and tweaking it. So yeah, like that was my first Kickstarter recently, and it was
Oh,
such a
congrats.
thing. Yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention I'm also itch funding something on itch.io.
Ooh, this
Uh,
is what I want you to tell me about. This is we are here so we can find out and we can
yeah,
support you. Do tell.
yeah. So Cozy Town is a cozy community building game. It's inspired by the mechanics of Avery Alder's A Quiet Year, except cozy. So you create a cozy
Interesting.
town. It's like Animal Crossing plus Stardew Valley,
Oh
right?
my
So you create a
word.
town over the year. It's very cute. It's very sweet. We did a playthrough recently on their Super Geek, and it was really
Yeah.
really fun, so you can see what the game is like. We're currently itch funding. We went through most of our goals. We just have one last big goal to make an audiobook version of the game, which I would really like to increase accessibility.
Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah.
I'm working on a project where I'm like narrating as like their game as well, and I've never been more in love with this
Oh,
idea. Why are we just starting to do this?
yeah, I
I want to narrate
know.
everybody's games. I
I
didn't know
know,
how much
right?
fun that was going to be.
It's amazing, amazing, amazing.
Oh my gosh. Okay, this is fantastic. So one more time, sorry, where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Temporal Hiccup. I use a lot of Sailor Moon gifs, and that's when you know that's me usually posting if there's a Sailor Moon gif on your timeline. And you can also find me on itch at temporalhiccup.itch.io and on Patreon at Sowrd Queen Games.
Fabulous. Well, thank you. And if you had fun with us tonight, why not have even more fun at Origins Game Fair, September 30th to October 3rd? Sign up to volunteer or submit your own events to earn awesome perks, including free badge and hotel stays. Hope to see you there. I have been your host, B Zelda. You can find me on Twitter as at B_Zelda. I'm a podcaster, streamer, anime enthusiast, and so much more. And I just want to say thank you, everybody, for popping in and chat, and we will see you next week. Wave bye.